Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari
Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana
Yamunandana Brajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tiravanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tiravanachari
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 2, on text 24. Previous verse made the statement that Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva overlook the material modes of nature, but worship of Shiva of Vishnu is best because, well, we talked about that. There's more reasons given. Today's verse, which uses a nice analogy. Firewood, well, Sanskrit. Partibadharano tumas tasmad agnistrī mayah tamasasturjas tasmat satvang yad brahma darshanam. Firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than the raw wood, and fire is still better, for by fire we can derive the benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifices. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas, but goodness, sattva, is best, because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. Srila Prabhupada's purport. As explained above, one can get release from the conditioned life of material existence by devotional service to the personality of Godhead. It is further comprehended herein that one has to rise to the platform of the mode of goodness, sattva, so that one can be eligible for the devotional service of the Lord. But if there are impediments on the progressive path, anyone, even from the platform of tamas, can gradually rise to the sattva platform by the expert direction of the spiritual master. Sincere candidates must therefore approach an expert spiritual master for such a progressive march. And the bona fide expert spiritual master is competent to direct a disciple from any stage of life, tamas, rajas, or sattva. It is a mistake, therefore, to consider that worship of any quality or any form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is equally beneficial. Except Vishnu, all separated forms are manifested under the conditions of material energy. And therefore, the forms of material energy cannot help anyone to rise to the platform of sattva, which alone can liberate a person from material bondage. The uncivilized state of life, or the life of the lower animals, is controlled by the mode of tamas. The civilized life of man with a passion for various types of material benefits is the stage of rajas. The rajas state of life gives a slight clue to the realization of the absolute truth in the forms of fine sentiments of philosophy, art, and culture with moral and ethical principles. But the mode of sattva is a still higher stage of material quality, which actually helps one in realizing the absolute truth. In other words, there is a qualitative difference between the different kinds of worshipping methods, as well as the respective results derived from the predominating deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Hara. Hara is another name for Lord Shiva. Om Gyanantimirantasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurudmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Putale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Videshatane Vanchakalpatarupyascha Krivasantubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than the raw wood. And fire is still better, for by fire we can derive the benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifice. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas, but goodness, sattva, is best, because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. So this is a nice analogy that substantiates what Prabhupada concludes the purport with. He says, in other words, there is a qualitative difference between the different kinds of worshiping methods, as well as the respective results derived from the predominating deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Hara, or Shiva. So just like with wood, you have the wood itself, and that's a manifestation. And if you start burning the wood, you have smoke. And that's another manifestation that's higher than the wood. I guess you could make a smoke flavor with it. Smoke is like somewhat useful, but mainly it just disturbs. It's mainly just a disturbance for the senses, your nose and your eyes. But you kind of can't burn wood without some smoke. But ultimately what you want fire, right? The fire is considered to be intrinsic in the wood. The capacity for the fire is there. It has to be drawn out of it. And so that fire creates light and heat, and that's actually useful. And just like in the creation of fire from wood, you have to have wood and you have to have some smoke in order for fire to be there. You can't just have fire. So similarly, in the material world, the mode of goodness is never just distinctly, only the mode of goodness. There's always a mixture. Chapter 14 Bhagavad Gita, where the science of the modes of nature is described, lays this out, that there's always going to be some mixture. Even if the mode of goodness is predominant, there's always some passion and some ignorance. So our job in the material world is to try to be as much of goodness as possible and limit the other two modes of nature. Just like when you're building a fire, you want there to be actual fire, not just a bunch of wood sitting there and not just smoke, because that's what's useful. Heat is useful, light is useful, right? You can continue the analogy and you can say, well, the actual fire is useful because you can perform a fire sacrifice, which was the the Yuga Dharma in a previous age, light also is useful because it eliminates darkness. It's like the classic analogy of Om Jnana Timirandhasya. I was born in darkness, and now I have light. So there's ignorance is darkness, and knowledge is light. So the light helps, and heat is also important because there's comfort. There's kind of nourishment in that. Get protected from the cold. There's some shelter. So this wood analogy is really useful because at the naive stage, we could say, well, if everything is coming from the same source, then wouldn't the worship of anything be equally valuable? You would think on some level that would make sense, but the whole point of the material world is to develop a discerning capacity, to actually be able to use our higher intelligence to discriminate and elevate. That's something that human beings can do. And animals can't really do it so much. They can do it to some degree, right? You can see like birds recognize certain objects and shiny things, and primates, mammals can be more discerning. Humans are meant to be even more discerning. That's the point of the human life. The more advanced a form of life is, the more discerning it can be, so it can choose. Ideally, really, that choice should be to choose the choice to elevate. So it isn't equally beneficial to give your attention to everything in the material world. Just like dead raw wood isn't equally beneficial to smoke or fire. And the fire itself is most beneficial. Yeah.
So to clarify, is the wood tamas, the smoke rajas, and the fire and the light sattva?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And therefore, our practices, we have a responsibility to say that not all spiritual practices are on the same level. We can't play the politically correct line of, well, it's all the same. That's definitely the politically correct, expedient message, but it's not the case. It's not actually a sectarian consideration, however. There is worship in the modes of nature in Vaishnavism or in that tradition or this tradition or any tradition, because the modes of nature are not sectarian. Everybody is under the influence of the modes of nature. You don't just like get a free pass because your skin is a certain color, you speak a certain language. If you think that's the case, you're under a mode of nature. Everybody's under the modes of nature. We're all very, very small. And so we have to decide how we're going to worship. And so worship of the Lord means worship that is free from a desire for material benefit. If you're worshiping for material benefit, you're worshiping in rajas, right? This science of bhakti itself under the modes of nature is given in the third canto by Kapiladev, where he talks about how if you're practicing so-called bhakti, but your motivation is to destroy or take someone or something down, your motivation is like violence or separatism, there's a way in which that's actually in tamas. Even though you may be performing the external activities of bhakti, maybe chanting Hare Krishna or worshiping a deity or what have you, if that's your motivation, that's just tamas, right? Like if you're in some spiritual tradition, but you want to strap bombs to your chest and blow yourself up for some political gain, I hate to break it to you, you're just in the lowest mode of nature. Doesn't matter what your holy book says. Doesn't matter what you think. That's your motivation. That's where you're at. If you're in rajas, you want some material gain, then if you want some material gain, you're in rajas. You're also performing bhakti potentially, but with an inferior goal. And goodness has its characteristics as well. And so these motivations are things we want to look out for that identify where we're at in the hierarchy of the modes. And it is a hierarchy. We do want to be in goodness as much as possible because it's better, it's less problematic. And the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also uses this analogy of smoke and fire. He says that every endeavor is covered by smoke, by faults, just like a fire is covered by smoke. Right? The fire is the point, and the smoke is a fault, but it's also an inevitable side effect. And so similarly, Krishna is saying, whatever your position in life, there's going to be some fault in it. So don't think that just by changing your position, you create perfection. You have to dedicate. your activities in whatever position you're in to the service of the highest good, to Krishna. That actually transcends the faults, because Arjuna's thinking and saying, look, I can't imagine how it's right here to go to war, because there's so much bad that's going to come from it. So better I just like don't go to war. Better I become anything else but this, because there's a fault. And Krishna's saying everything's going to have a fault. You think of being a Brahmin so great? And Prabhupada elaborates in the purport, Brahmins in previous ages had to engage in animal sacrifice. Yeah, the animal would get a new life, but there's still some violence. Or Brahmins maybe have to be detached enough from the world to be considered a Brahmin, which means they have to tolerate a certain amount of injustice around them. You know, when Hiranyakashipu or Kamsa is violating the natural order of the world, the Brahmins are just kind of sitting there suffering because they can't perform their fire sacrifices. They didn't have the capacity or the right to pick up a sword and like, you know, turn wrong into right. They can't do that. It's not their dharma. That's a fault. So Kshatriyas have a fault, Vaishyas have a fault. You know, Vaishyas have to like organize business, and that means they have to lie. Prabhupada says the business person has to make lies. They have to say, oh, I mean, my kids are gonna starve if I give you that price. And it's like, it's a lie, it's a game. Commerce is a game, and you have to play the game. And there's a certain way in which like you can't be like a Brahmin in that world. If you're a Brahmin as a business person, you're not going to make a lot of money. You're not going to perform the Vaishya Dharma very well. And Shudras also, there's a fault, because the Shudra has to follow their master. And guess what? If your master is a saint, that's great. And if your master is the opposite, you still have to follow them. That's what Shudras do. That's what they have to do. They have to be loyal. And that's a fault. And it's like, whatever your position in life, you have to try to dedicate it in service. So why this elaborate analogy is that we have to actually aim properly. We have to aim to the supreme good. We can't just aim for some material benefit. We can't aim at Brahma, Shiva, and think like, yeah, they can give me some benefit and that's enough. You have to aim for the Lord that's transcendent to the modes of nature. And you have to consider that even if there is some fault in your material position, just try to just try to dedicate your activities to the supreme highest good. And that fault will be transcended. It's not that just by shifting around the position in the world that will actually create the transcendence. Transcendence is by dedication. And one of the consequences of this logic and this truth is that even if you don't know who the Supreme Lord is, you know, like there's a discussion here of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. If one doesn't even know, has never even heard of them, never heard of Krishna, never heard a bona fide name of the Lord who has infinite names, but there's some sense that I want to be free from this material thing. I actually want the highest good. If they're worshiping with that sense, then their own sincerity will guide them, and Super Soul will put them in touch with practitioners one after the other till they actually come to a more refined and mature understanding. It's actually very astonishing, because it's saying that if you want the highest good, even if you're in a cult, even if you're in a made up religion, and there are a number of them, but you actually don't just want, you know, the material benefits they promise, the social or financial profit that you can have from following other people, you know, in some cult or some made up thing. You actually really want to be a humble servant. Then guess what? In this life or the next, you're going to get the opportunity to hear from devotees because you're asking for it. And that's always going to be transcendental, hearing from devotees of the absolute truth, the transcendent Lord, and approaching that transcendent Lord through spiritual practice is always going to be the bona fide process, as much as light and heat are actually useful relative to smoke. Otherwise, all the other benefits of religion or any social or material or ecclesiastical consideration, they're just like smoke, you know? They confuse, they obscure, they distract, you know, follow me and I'll give you the world's greatest sexual experience or money or power. That's all a joke. It's actually all just a complete distraction. Everything that everybody's going for under lower modes of nature is just like one form of distraction or another. And we want to come to a place where we can see that and just be interested in serving for service's sake. You know, when Hiranyakashipu was killed, Prahlad Maharaj is there, he's praying to Lord Nrsingadev, and Nrsingadev says, okay, take a benediction. Prahlad Maharaj says, no, I don't want a benediction from you. I just served you to serve you because you're the Lord and I'm your servant. I wasn't doing this to get something back. I'm not a merchant. That's pure devotional service. That's the only thing that can satisfy the self. If you're thinking like, great, here's my laundry list. Santa Claus, here's where it's at. This is what I want. You, as soon as Prahlad Maharaj says, as soon as you have material desire, that's where your suffering begins. Even if you're facing the Lord and you have a material desire and he says, take a benediction, you're like, great, here it is. You're suffering because already you're incomplete. Already your experience of the Lord even and reality is tied to, as soon as I get this, then I'll be happy. Never gonna happen. Never gonna happen. You can't even appreciate the Lord in front of you at that point because he's just your order carrier. He's just your provider. He's just a big Amazon. You know, how can you appreciate the supreme person if he's just, that's all he is, right? Like children, really young children, it's like their parents just fulfill their demands. They're not really full-fledged persons, their parents in their eyes. They're the ones who make things happen. And then later you realize, oh wow, they're a real person. And the universe gets a little bigger and you can start to appreciate personhood instead of just thinghood. So I heard one devotee put it this way: it's like in the mode of tamas, we're thinking about having. It's like have consciousness. Mode of passion, it's like do consciousness. It's like I'm defined by what I do and the consequences of what I do. And I'm the doer. And if you ask me who I am, I'm a merchant. I'm this job. I'm that occupation. And in the mode of goodness, it's be. I am this. I am consciousness. I am a child of God, right? Be, do, have. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So we want to aim at the transcendent Lord. And perhaps even more importantly, we want to practice free from the desire to just do or have. Doing and having comes. It's natural part of life. You don't have to endeavor for it. If you function properly as be, you are that. You're going to act in that mode. You're going to act as that. You know, if you think I'm a devotee of God, this is who I am. I'm a servant. Then you're going to act as a servant. And if you act as a servant, there's a result, right? Like Prabhupada considered himself a servant, so he came to the West to follow his spiritual master's order. And was there a result? Things happened, right? Temples were built, devotees were made, stomachs were filled, bank accounts were filled and emptied, and so many things happen. But it has to begin with the right self-conception, the right orientation. That no matter what happens, no matter what I'm offered, I'm just a servant. I'm just here to make Krishna happy. I'm just here to follow my senior devotees who know how to make Krishna happy. I want to make them happy. That's all I am. And everything I do and everything that comes, I orient it according to that. So that's mode of goodness worship. And that's light and heat instead of smoke and dull wood. Hare Krishna. So let's take some reflections. This is an elaborate analogy. Anything that stood out in the analogy or the discussion of the modes of nature or worship in the modes of nature?
Excuse me, before you do that, could you just repeat the be, do, have? Be was sattva. I'm a servant, devotee of God. Do is Rajas or Thomas? I forget.
Rajas.
Rajas, and that's
Do is
I am my profession.
Yeah, I'm my profession. I'm the doer. I'm the one that makes things happen.
And then, well, can you repeat what have was?
Have is ignorance. Have is the idea that possessing things will make me happy. Right? If possessing things makes you happy, that's your conception, you're in ignorance. If doing things makes you happy, that's where you're mainly at, that's passion. If being, like if you take pride and happiness and joy in being a moral person, a peaceful person, then you're in goodness. And ultimately, having the right self-conception, it means understanding that you're a servant. That's be. And then do and have to come afterwards. Otherwise, if you start with like do, You create another self-conception afterwards as a consequence of do. There's always like a hierarchy. If you put do on top, right, and you are that, you're the doer. But have on top, then I'm the owner of these things, right? And then you're beholden to that. As soon as you lose those things, who even are you?
Thank you.
I really love the analogy of the wood and the fire, the wood, the smoke and the fire. And I was thinking about how at times in my life or anyone's life, right, with Rajas, that smoke, like it can feel like you're like, okay, I feel the heat of the fire. You might like think you're in sattva, right? Or like you might think that there's this purity in your devotion or sincerity in your whatever it is you're doing. But then the smoke starts to burn your eyes and you're like, right? It's like there's this moment of like, oh wait, this isn't the fire. Like this is the aftermath of it, or this is that just like
Consequence.
a consequence of it. Right. And then in experiencing like truly serving those that are more senior devotees and serving Krishna and having Sangha and association and whether that's a Diksha guru or a Shiksha guru or gurus and the way that unfolds, then it's like when the wind turns and the smoke's blowing the other way and you're still able to access that fire, but your eyes aren't burning anymore.
Yeah.
It's like that. And I'm able to see clearer, more
It's tangible.
clearly. Yeah. So that analogy just really works on many levels. And yeah, like Holiness Radhanath Swami says, like if you want to be, happiness comes in serving others, not in being served. And when we're in Rajas and Tamas, that just doesn't seem true.
Yeah, that's the thing about our position, is that we don't actually see things the way they are. We just see them according to where we're at,
Right.
where we are. So if you're in like Rajas or Tamas and you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, just thinking, I have to do this. I'm so busy. Like this is, I don't have time. And then wherever you're at, that's what makes sense to you. It's actually a tangible experience coming to a higher mode of nature. As much as a tangible experience coming to a lower mode of nature, it's a tangible experience because the consciousness actually expands, right? If you're in tamas, you can't really move. You're depressed. You make excuses. You're a victim. You're stuck. You're literally not able to do things with yourself. When you're depressed, you sleep. You just lie there. And there's a lot of self-help kind of work around getting people to Rajas because, be a go-getter, make things happen, like take responsibility for yourself, decide what you want, decide that you even deserve that. Because in tamas, you think like, I don't deserve anything. I'm a terrible person. I should suffer, right? And in Rajas, it's like, no, I'm great. I'm the best. Why don't I get that? Why shouldn't I make money? Why shouldn't I be happy or whatever? And it's like, if someone in Rajas now gets up, does things, and it's a tangible experience when if you've been sick and you've been bedridden and you get up and you're able to move again, it's tangible. Similarly, if you're depressed and all of a sudden you feel like, I'm over this breakup or I'm over feeling bad about myself and I can do stuff again, that's tangible. That's passion. Okay. But what happens when you get to sattva is that you're no longer pushed, the needles, the pinpricks of like, I have to do this. There's this goal, I have this carrot dangling and I have to like chase it. That's not there anymore. You're doing things on principle. And you're able to pause and your consciousness is expanded to the point that you can actually concentrate. You have focus, you have intensity, you have concentration, you have the ability to consider the consequences of your actions. And your intelligence is much broader. You can see principles and you can apply a principle out of abstraction into the world. Oh, honesty is a good thing. Well, how does that work? Well, this is what happens when a political system is based on dishonesty. Oh, look at that. Wow. You can take that and look at it. Wow, that's what happens. What about if I apply that in a family? What does that look like? And you can apply these things and your intelligence grows because you're in sattva. It's a tangible experience. There's peace and there's knowledge. So similarly in transcendence, it's a tangible experience. How do you know you're experiencing transcendence? You just know. You just know when you feel enlivened in Krishna's service. You just know when you see him and your body and mind are transformed in a way that makes no sense, but are joyful, and you're drawn and attracted. You just know. Just like when you're eating food, how do you know when you're eating the food? You just know it. Your stomach tells you. Your whole body becomes enlivened. Your tongue, mind, every sense becomes like more.
Mhm.
This is right. I need this. This is good. It's just tangible. And if you're not getting it, you may think it's normal. You may think like this is appropriate, but you actually haven't eaten, and you're cranky because of it.
Mhm.
So we have to hear about these symptoms, because if you're in a lower mode, you don't know what a higher mode looks like because you've forgotten. You have to hear about it,
Mhm.
and you have to be around those who are in a higher mode, and you'll get lifted, elevated, pulled right up. Yeah. Remember that experience you have like a teacher who's patient and tolerant with you, and you're having like a childish episode, or you ever see that? Kids are like having like a freak out, and the parents just like, yeah, I hear you're angry. I can feel you're going through it. And they don't go to that nature, the lower mode, they just like stay up here. The child eventually like comes up
Mhm.
because they get lifted, because we're little associators. We just take whatever's around us. And the parents and tell us, guess what?
Of course.
Even if you're in goodness, being around them, you're all of a sudden now you're vicious and unhappy. So we have to have that association.
I was really touched and really been thinking about you saying, you know, everything has a fault.
Mm.
You know, as a recovering perfectionist,
Mhm.
yeah, that one is really like, I need to write that on the wall, on my skin, I don't know, somewhere, to remind myself that, you know, you can't be perfect no matter how much you strive for the mode of goodness. Perfection isn't a thing. It's never going to be a thing. It's, you try and you try to do your best, but it's, you know, it's never going to be without fault. That's just really poignant.
Perfection is perfection of intention, perfection of your aim. If you're aiming at Krishna, that's perfect. Prabhupada's perfect. Does that mean he never made mistakes? No, it doesn't mean he never made mistakes, because he's not Krishna. There are many times Srila Prabhupada tried to spread Krishna consciousness and then paused and said, this isn't working. Let's change this. You know, someone could say, like, well, he's a conditioned soul, right? Or someone who's a fanatic could say, no, that never happened. He never changed his mind. It's like, that's not how perfection works. He's not Krishna. You know, he's always intently focused on how do I satisfy Guru and Krishna. And he tried to do it, and then he would adjust and improve and shift directions, because that wasn't working. This wasn't working. He's tried to establish Krishna consciousness, ISKCON, in India. Didn't happen. It wasn't working. Then he came to the West and it worked. And he went back to India and it worked. He had to retransplant it out of India first. But, you know, that means like it's not about not making mistakes, right? Yesterday we played a soccer game, and I tried my best to like not let a goal in on defense. And we won like 6-3, but we still let in 3 goals. But the point is, you got to know your duty and just do it. Do the best you can without passion or tamas. And it's still like you're still gonna get scored on. You're still gonna look like a fool. You're still gonna make mistakes. And the whole idea of a perfectionist is created by experiencing the modes of nature, right? In the modes of nature, you think like the result is what defines me, and I only have value if I'm perfect. I do. That's not be consciousness. That's do consciousness. In be consciousness, you already are perfect. You already are a child of Krishna. You just got to decide what you want to do about that. Do you want to act as a child of Krishna and a servant, or do you want to forget it?
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Madhuri Gopi.
Someday I'll remember how to say it out loud. There was a couple. I had a couple different takeaways and really like reflections, and they're completely different. So I can break it up, I guess. But the first one is that you said, I love that you said that you need like all three of the modes of nature, right? And it's about like the balance of that. They're going to all be there present in that in some way or some form. And I was thinking about the Yagya from the other night. And when Dial was setting it up, I was thinking about like how intentional he was with setting it up with like the right amount of wood, the right amount of, you know, kindling, the right amount of everything that he put into it. And thinking about how like he was had it in this little container and I was sitting like 2 inches away from this little container. And around it, it's like all of this fruit and everything. So if a piece of wood fell, all of that would light on fire. And so I was thinking this, watching him, like thinking like, wow, like, you know, and as I was watching the fire and like giving my like dearest, you know, hope that everything into it, I was also realizing exactly what you said. Like there needs to be the right amount of wood in this yagya in order for it to be in the way that it is, right? And so it's all about balance and like checking yourself, and because there was the exact right amount of wood, the fire stayed small and the smoke stayed at bay, and it was just it's really powerful to like really think about that yagya as like your life, how to live in that exact way, um you know,
Yeah,
to walk towards purification, you know.
we're trying to offer ourselves to Krishna. We're like little lumps of wood,
Mm.
and our whole life is a sacrifice. Yeah, it's not even that like the mode you want to have any mixture of the modes, is that you will have a mixture of the modes. They're always going to be there, right? Like somebody can be striving for maximum mode of goodness, but you still have to go to sleep. What's sleep?
Right.
Sleep is ignorance. You lie down and you're dead to the world for a few hours, and if you don't do it, good luck. You're not going to function. Not when you have a material body. You have to sleep. Even Srila Prabhupada had to take rest. He would joke about it. He would say, "I hate this. I hate sleep."
I'm
And he
going to
got it
waste
down.
time. I'm going to waste
I'm
time.
going to waste time
That's
now,
what
he would say.
Yeah.
And he had it down to like 3 hours is enough for him, right? Just that. Actually, it's interesting because the Tattva Sandarbha, I think, somewhere I read, I think Jiva Goswami says that the experience we have in sleep is that the soul comes in proximity to the super soul.
Mm,
And I was thinking, well, that's why we feel refreshed, because we actually come back into connection with the super soul. And then I was thinking, well, that would make sense, and that was why pure devotees need less sleep, because they're always so much closer to the super soul, even in their waking life. There's no like microsecond shift where they're like out of alignment with the Lord. They're so aligned that they need less rest. Their body is already operating so closely to what the super soul wants them to do that there's less inefficiency. They don't need to sleep for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a night. They sleep for 3 hours a night. You know, we went to Madhuri Gopa's initiation, and our wall was adjoining Radhanath Swami's room, and we could hear him.
Yeah.
And we were joking about it with Raghunath, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't think he sleeps. He sleeps
much.
and much. Yeah, pure devotees don't need, but they still have to take some rest. There's still some, you know, apparent ignorance. As long as you're in this world, there has to be some of that, you know. But you got to find that right balance. And if you're not a pure devotee, don't try and get by on 3 hours. It's not going to work for you. Find your balance point so you can engage effectively in Krishna service.
Right. How do you know if you think you're a pure devotee, you're not? That's how you know. Jai, beautiful reflection.
Anything else?
When you first started saying that this was a really good analogy, and you said firewood is transformation, and then you went back and you're like, oh yeah, I have to do that. I was thinking that the thought that went through my head is that like that I had pictured myself in this room, kind of like a maze with a bunch of mirrors and smoke. And it's like life is about looking for the lens that you want to look through, and you have to go through a mirror at some point, whether you're seeing your reflection or if there's just so much smoke that you have to like wait until it all clears to really see through what it is that you really want until you can actually see the fire.
Mm.
Because sometimes you can, when you start a fire, it can smolder and there can just be like so much smoke and you're like, oh, I didn't want to do that. I
Yeah.
think about as life is, sometimes we try to start a fire, but we can't because maybe the wood's too wet, maybe we
Yeah.
don't have the right balance. And until we can find that lens that we want to look through and get through the smoke to really find the light, then that the light is what we're looking for.
Yeah, then you have to follow someone else's light.
Right.
Before you can build your own. Yeah, when wood is wet, it creates smoke, sputters. It's slower to start and it's much more like there's a lot of stingy smoke that comes out. And Prabhupada talks about how if you're trying to practice spiritual life and you're engaging in sense gratification at the same time, like too much sense gratification or illicit sense gratification, it's like pouring water on a fire, right? So it's also that thing of like, if our bodies and minds have been trained to the lower modes of nature, we have habits, either gross, like we're actually acting them out, or subtle, like in our minds, we're oriented towards habits that are tamasic or rajasic. We're trying to like light the fire, but there's going to still be this disturbance, but it's okay. The only way to get through wet wood is to keep burning it. And don't pour any more water on it.
Hopefully.
So, and in the meantime, we have to have that association from persons who are like clear that when you're with them, you're like, oh, this is what it looks like. Because otherwise it's just like, it doesn't make sense. If we were able to function as our own gurus, we wouldn't need them. Srila Prabhupada ki jai,
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Vanchakalpatarupyascha, Prasantubhyeva Patitanam Vaishnavibhyo. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.